In October 2017, Xi Jinping was re-elected for a second 5-year term as General Secretary of the Communist Party. In his acceptance speech, he stated, "The China model for a better social governance system offers a new option for other countries and nations who want to speed up their development while preserving their independence. And it offers Chinese wisdom and a Chinese approach to solving the problems facing mankind." It was his announcement that Red China wants other countries to emulate its model of governance. Yet 1 year later, in a December 2018 speech, Xi once again suggested the potential universality of the China model. Clearly, Xi's ambition to dominate the world through the export of its political and economic system is to be carried out. On one level, Red China exports its model through political and economic capacity building in other countries. There is a concentrated effort by the Chinese Communist Party to educate and train foreign officials on the nature of the model and on how to implement it. Some of this training takes place in multilateral forums. For example, in October 2019, the Zhejiang province in China hosted a forum called "The Significance of China's Social Governance to the World." From human rights to energy to trade, China's growing influence in the international system is bending institutions, rules, and norms in its preferred directions. Under the auspices of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has also hosted 2 to 3 week seminars on how to conduct online censorship and surveillance for officials from other countries. The Guangxi province is home to a leadership academy, established in 2017, whose mission it is to train officials from the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, ASEAN, on China's governance and economic development model. The training program reached almost 1,000 ASEAN officials. It lasts about 10 days and includes subjects such as how a government can control its population and run its country. Not only does China provide defense training for the army, economic training for ministers, and enforcing training for police, but there are also highly specific lessons on what tools to use to suppress dissent. At the same time, Red China is training government officials how to encourage foreign investment, while accessing and taking foreign technology and skills. The China model has perhaps found the most adherents in Africa. Beijing is particularly active in exporting the elements of its model, dedicated to state control over civil society. The CCP provides instruction on how to monitor, guide, and manage public opinion.
All the roads around are constructed by Chinese. Wherever there is a new road, there should be a camera. Okay. This is part of the contract for all the Chinese companies doing construction.
The Chinese government also provides the technology and technical support necessary to enhance the state's control over civil society. In Uganda, China's National Electronics Import and Export Corporation is supporting capacity building for Uganda's Communications Commission. Huawei technicians reportedly helped Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni intercept his opponent's Skype and WhatsApp communications after his own government team couldn't do it.
I've been put under 24-hour surveillance. All our phones are hacked. I cannot talk to you about sensitive stuff or about private stuff on my phone because our conversation is being listened to.
We came to Kampala, the capital of Uganda, to investigate how the government is using advanced surveillance technology from China to stifle dissent. Ugandan government officials told us that employees at Chinese telecom giant Huawei are playing an essential role in the government's effort to spy on opposition politicians, including Bobi Wine. So how exactly is Huawei involved in all of this?
It was hard, but Huawei, our cyber experts are good. They worked with us, and we broke into Bobi Wine's encrypted messages, and this is of his entire team.
China's surveillance technologies hold enormous attraction for many dictators around the world. In Latin America, Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador have all purchased various forms of surveillance technology from Chinese firms. These technologies will give authoritarian regimes a massive ability to sanction people who engage in political or social behaviors, which the government disapproves.
Yo creo que el modelo chino lo que genera es un control sobre la sociedad, un control rígido sobre la sociedad.
On another level, Red China exports its model through propaganda films and media control. Over the past few years, the Chinese government has launched and subsidized a satellite TV project for 10,000 villages in Africa. The Chinese company, StarTimes, provides both the satellite dishes and the content subscription packages in Africa. It now transmits Chinese television shows into the homes of more than 20 million subscribers in 30 African countries. Unsurprisingly, much of the content is devoted to shows that paint a favorable picture of China. Moreover, in Kenya, its cheapest package features only Kenyan and Chinese channels. Access to other channels, such as the BBC or Al Jazeera, costs more. In 2015, the Chinese government funded and heavily supported the Wolf Warrior film series. Wolf Warrior movies became a huge box office success in China, breaking records. It also echoed China's political message to the world, not to take China lightly. The film features soldier Leng Feng fighting for China's interests against American and Western villains, while protecting vulnerable Africans. And again in 2021, a Chinese epic about the strategic defeat of the United States during the Korean War, The Battle at Lake Changjin, was released on September 30, 2021, and was the latest in a line of patriotic Chinese films specially approved by the government, that some observers say border on propaganda. Films like The Battle at Lake Changjin and the Wolf Warrior series promote nationalism and patriotism in China, pushing pro-China ideas, and the idea that foreigners, mainly Westerners, are the bad guys. The film's influence even found its way into foreign policy, as Beijing's new strategy was dubbed Wolf Warrior diplomacy. The diplomats themselves being the Wolf Warriors, pushing back aggressively against any criticism of Red China or the party. Red China's infrastructure development model has also been accompanied by significant levels of infrastructure-induced government debt, a lack of transparency in deal-making, corruption, a failure to involve local populations in the decision-making, planning processes, and popular protests. Over the past 2 decades, it has advanced its model of special economic zones and industrial parks, a process that has accelerated under the auspices of the BRI, where China has stakes or controlling stakes in ports. It is also establishing industrial parks, linked to these ports and railway stops. However, the parks are overwhelmingly focused on attracting Chinese companies and Chinese people. In Cambodia and Laos, the building of Red China industrial parks displaced the local citizens, replacing them with Chinese workers, Chinese businesses, and eventually Red China's control. In Cambodia, Sihanoukville used to be a sleepy coastal town frequented mostly by backpackers. One of the major cities on Red China's Belt and Road Initiative, Sihanoukville has seen unprecedented levels of Chinese investment into the city with numerous casinos opened up. The city's ethnic makeup has changed, with thousands of mainland Chinese workers, developers, and investors settling in the city, much to the dismay of the locals. As of 2019, nearly 80,000 Chinese live in Sihanoukville, accounting for 90% of the city's expat population. Mandarin signage is increasingly replacing Khmer and English signage in the city. crime in the form of drunken violence and organized crime are increasing. Cost of living and prices went up, which pushed many local people out onto the streets.
យើងជួលផ្ទះគេមកក្នុងមួយខែបើសិនយើងមានលទ្ធភាពជួល200ជាងទៅ300ក្នុងមួយខែតែខ្ញុំមានលទ្ធភាពណាជួលព្រោះខ្ញុំសុខចិត្តដេកលើផាសាប់
In Laos, Botan is a border town to China. It is also a major location on the BRI infrastructure plan. Dramatic development began in 2003, when the area was designated a Special Economic Zone, SEZ. The Laos government signed a 30-year lease on 1,640 hectares of land with a Chinese developer, who invested $500 million. To build the SEZ, the whole village of Botan was relocated 10 kilometers away, in a settlement area called New Botan. Considered a piece of President Xi's flagship infrastructure project, this border town is the first stop inside Laos, along the Laos-China railway network, which will connect Kunming, China, to the Laotian capital of Vientiane. With its clock set to Beijing time, and transactions conducted in Chinese currency, Botan became a virtual Chinese outpost. These economic models only serve Red China's interests and ambition. They increase dependencies on China and reduce sovereign power. Often, rules and regulations for environmental protection are not observed. These industrial parks have suffered from lack of oversight and become sources of pollution and contamination. Finally, China also uses the leverage of its market to coerce international actors to accept elements of its model. Most frequently, Beijing pressures companies, sport teams, and countries not to raise issues about Taiwan's independence and the human rights abuses in the Xinjiang region, or risk losing access to its market. For example, in 2018, Beijing threatened to cut off international airlines and hotel chains that identified Taiwan as a separate entity on their websites, the access to its market. More recently, the Boston Celtic basketball player, Enes Kanter, spoke out about the human rights abuses in China by calling out Xi Jinping and wearing shoes with the words, "modern-day slavery," and "no more excuses" written on them. Red China punished the NBA and the Celtics by having their games pulled off the Chinese video streaming site, Tencent. Moreover, as Red China moves to include multinational companies in its social credit system, pressure will only grow for these companies to align their behavior more closely with Chinese values and policy preferences. Red China also exports its model through its participation in international institutions and regimes. It attempts to make the United Nations a tool for achieving its hegemonic ambition. Over the past several years, Red China has assumed a leadership role within many United Nations institutions.
I have seen over the 35 years of my career an increased amount of activity by the Chinese. But where they have failed, and we constantly see reports that indicate this, is that Africans still prefer, if at all possible, to work with the United States. When they have a choice, they choose us.
Red China is currently the second largest monetary contributor to the UN. Red China's goals of heavy influence in the United Nations are to silence the critics of its human rights record, providing monetary incentives to receive the support of other member states, and bringing more of its party members into the United Nations. Beijing has been pressuring the United Nations to limit human rights groups' participation in key events. For instance, Duc Nguyen, president of the World Uyghur Congress, was hindered from attending the UN Permanent Forum on indigenous issues. Even with an increasing number of news reports, reveals the humanitarian crisis in Xinjiang, including physical torture, and cultural genocide. Red China continues to downplay the violent nature of its policy, while arguing that its so-called de-radicalization and re-education measures make Xinjiang a safer place. China has taken further steps to impede the work of the UN Human Rights Council by appealing to other authoritarian regimes, such as Saudi Arabia, Algeria, and Russia, to rally in support of China's oppressive rule. Ultimately, Xi's vision for Red China world dominance is being realized through capacity building and exporting its authoritarian governance model by coercion, manipulation, and economic leverage